Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Hello again, and thank you all so much for joining us here for this episode. Thanks for spreading the word and all the positive feedback you guys have been sending our way. It's been great to see how much you guys have been getting out of these episodes, and I'm sure today's episode will be no different. We're talking today about whole team and whole staff investment. A lot of the great guests I've had on in previous episodes have talked about the strides their teams have made once everyone had bought in and once everyone was invested. And I think we can all agree that a team that's invested will have a much greater chance at being successful on and off the court. But what exactly is the process of getting to that level of buy-in and investment? Well, that's what we're going to discuss today with my guest, who prides himself on getting that level of investment from his whole team and from his staff. So I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Erik Johnson today. Coach, happy to have you on. How's it going?
Glad to be here. It's going well. Just trying to keep warm in this ever-changing weather and trying to figure out the next thing we're going to do with our team.
For sure. It's definitely a process for sure. And you say getting warm as somebody who lives in Phoenix now. That's a bit of a foreign concept for me, but I grew up in Chicago. I get how it goes, especially near wintertime, staying warm for sure. So, Coach, let's get into your journey here. So where's the game of basketball taking you? Where's your coaching journey taking you? And where are you currently at right now?
So I grew up in Rochester, New York, so knew all about cold. And PE teachers and basketball coaches were like superheroes to me. I was a player and blew out my hamstring my senior year. And my high school coach looked at me and said, "Hey, do you want to assistant coach?" And I'm looking at this guy like he's the president or some action figure. I'm like, yes, please. So I got to sit behind his bench and learn from him. And he goes on to the Hall of Fame for New York teachers and coaches. Go to SUNY Cortland, and I'm friends with all guys who are in the same boat. It's a big school for physical education teachers and coaches. And get a call from a buddy of mine. He's like, "Hey, when you come back for student teaching, try to get into this school. The girls team needs an assistant coach." So I go back to where my parents were. They had moved to a different city now. I went back to Rochester, didn't know they moved. Led to an interesting 5 minutes at my old house, but get to this new town, and it's a little in the middle of nowhere place called Honeoye, New York. And they've got this girls program that is out of this world. And Mark Storm is my host teacher, and he's the girls coach. And I couldn't have learned more if I wanted to from that guy. And go to a job fair after that season. We went to the state semis, go to this job fair. He gives me an awesome recommendation and brings me down to Suffolk, Virginia, where my wife and I have been for the last 16, 17 years. And now I've coached at a couple small schools. And now I'm at Grassfield High School, which is a 6A school, one of the bigger ones in the state, and just trying to make my difference here with these guys.
What was the transition like for you going from that more small school environment to now going to a 6A school? Was that a big adjustment for you or no?
It took a minute. When I first came down, I worked in a school district in Suffolk, Virginia, where they take sports very, very seriously.
Yeah.
And I was a JV boys coach, and I'm sitting there, and it had been a minute since I had one of those breathtaking starstruck moments. But I go in for a JV game. There's a line outside, and I'm like, this is a JV game. I'm not used to this. And we're at Nasman River High School. I'll never forget it. They turn the lights off. They've got this little red light that does everything, and lights come back on. My guys are all like, "What's going on?" And their varsity coach, Ed Young, is a mentor of mine. And he's standing behind my bench, comes out of nowhere like Batman. "Welcome to the big league, son." It's like, this is a JV game. But after JV, I went back to a smaller school to start varsity because they were begging for a varsity coach. So I go from 4A to 2A, which is real small. And then Grassfield has this job opening. Another mentor of mine, Clint Wright, calls me and he says, you should really put in for this job. You know your stuff. You're able to get people to run through a wall for you. Go interview. Worst case scenario, you don't get it. You go back to the school you're at. And I sit down with Mike Perez and Matt Purrier, the principal and AD here, and we're talking. And the next thing I know, he's calling me a week later, like, hey, what's your polo size? And again, I get hit with that moment. We open up our first year with me 2 years ago against Hickory. And I'm used to maybe 200-300 people in the gym, and all of a sudden there's 1,200. And I'm sitting there like, we're going to have to bring it now. And I look at the video of myself, and there's this big goofy smile. And I'm like, God, pay attention to the game, coach. But it took a second, and the whole year had moments like that. But I think that we've got the right staff in here, and we've got our feet entrenched in the ground, and we're ready to go.
Yeah. And it's one of those situations where you just have this adjustment period, but then you realize like, wait, I got a coach. I got these guys, these girls that are like dependent on me. Like, okay, I got to get over it myself, and we got to get to business sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, that sounds like quite the adjustment. 1,200. I mean, I don't know how I'd react the first time.
It was different.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can imagine that would be a different situation to be put in. So you wear, a couple different coaching hats. I was looking at your Twitter, your byline there, and you wear, besides the one at Grassfield, you have other coaching responsibilities and other little coaching hats that you wear as well. So I wanted to ask you about, how have you kind of grown as a coach by being involved in so many different positions? What have you kind of taken from, going from these different stops when you put on this one coaching hat to another coaching hat throughout the calendar year?
Definitely, I've learned something different everywhere I've gone. And I've been Lakeland, Poquoson, Windsor, Grassfield, Honeoye. I've been a little bit of everywhere. And there's always, I try to find something that I can learn and add it to the coaching repertoire. And with, you saw the Twitter byline, which I have to delete stuff all the time because I'm always getting new stuff.
Yeah, right.
I try to use my platform to help others and to bring light to other situations. Myself and a buddy started this mentoring group called the Association when I worked in the elementary school, where we would help at-risk kids, get the lessons that they maybe not, I don't want to say they weren't getting at home, but they needed them reinforced. And we bring in coaches because, like I said before, coaches and PE teachers are always superheroes to me. Some kids read comic books, other kids do other stuff. I don't know. I looked at these guys. Ooh.
Yeah.
So I try to use this platform, and it's been good to me. And I tell my assistants, and I tell the team manager who's been with us, her name's Millie. I tell her all the time, I'm like, I don't know how people know my name, because I'm just some regular guy who goes home, watches too much TV, watches way too much pro wrestling, but apparently people want to be around me for stuff. And, Coach Concepcion calls me for a pro-am team one morning, and I'm like, what? Like, did you not just see the season I had? And then Coach Claiborne with the Adidas push team, Coach, we need you with us. I want you to be an assistant for a year and this and that. I'm like, God, yeah, I'm in. How did you find me? But it's always been just my mom and dad were always learn something from every situation. My first year of coaching, varsity level, our first game, we lost 121-11. We played a Bruton squad where Marcus Carter, if you're watching this, thanks. They're throwing dunks off the backboard to each other. And I'm just sitting there like, I'm in over my head. And I call my buddy Nick, who's at RFA in New York. And I'm like, I don't know if I know what I'm doing. Like, dude, just learn from it. You learned you have to play a different defense. And you learned, more importantly, what you need to do in practice. And then I stop at Lakeland, and I'm under Clint Wright, who's a mentor of mine. And I learned time management and the importance of having a practice plan. As a JV coach, I just walk in and be like, this is what we need to do. This is what we're going to do. Clint's like, you're going to write it down and you're going to follow it.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I've tried to bring to these kids. Now, I was just talking to our head football coach at Grassfield about time management with these kids in this weird time we're in.
Mm.
So it's always just grabbing one thing and bringing it to the next and building upon it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting what you mentioned about how your name can just sort of get out there, because I find that that's so true. I've even had situations where people have like come up to me and who know who I am. I don't even know who they are sometimes, and but it happens. Usually a good thing too. Like people talk about you, and next thing you know, some of these doors will open up, and you're like, oh, like. All right. And I've had situations like you said, where it's like, have you seen like the season I've had though? Like, are you sure like you want me involved in this, that, or the other? But it's just crazy when your name gets out there and it's for good reasons, like the opportunities that kind of arise from that. So yeah, I mean, you are busy, that is for sure, but good kind of busy, because always involved in basketball and always doing something. It looks like one way or the other. So
I'm never home. My wife loves it. We have players come through the house all the time, and it's from different teams. And we've created a mini family of some of these kids that I've coached over the years. And, one of them just had Achilles surgery, and he's calling us, and he calls my wife and makes her whole day. And, we're wishing Q a speedy recovery, but it's been a journey so far. And I'm only 38. It's been a journey, but it's one I wouldn't trade for anything. And the people you meet, and you keep busy because you can always help somebody else.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Now, your motto, and I've seen this plastered throughout many things that you have, so I know you're committed, and I know you've bought into this motto, is invested over interested. So can you take me through what that means, and then also what does that look like in the basketball sense as well?
So it's kind of your Walmart version of Bobby Knight's 3 rules of don't do anything to embarrass yourself, your family, or the program. I always loved that, but I wanted to make it something of my own, in that he took every aspect of life and related it right to basketball and every action you do. And basketball is weird. You can never lift a weight and be a good ball player. And you could lift all the weights in the world and be a terrible one. Or you could be like Anthony Mason back in the day and still play pro. But invested over interested was something I created very early on in my career, because I'd have kids ask, why? Why do I need to eat right? Why do we need to be in the weight room? Why are you making us get on the baseline 5,000 times? But I thought about it. I was okay, so what is our why, and how do we introduce it to people? So I was like, well, we've got to be invested. And when you invest in something, everybody thinks money right away. I'm like, nah, we're talking about our time here. We're talking about, you've got to put your lifestyle. We talk about that at Grassfield all the time. Whatever you do, you're investing into something. And if you want to play basketball at the next level, at the college level, I mean, we have some amazing colleges in Virginia, and everybody's always saying, oh, we want to go D1. The D3s down here, tough, Wesleyan and CNU. And it's like, I look at those staffs, and I'm friends with them. And it's like, if you're not invested in putting in the time, you're not going to be there. And it became very clear to me early on, you could pick out the kids that wanted to play and the kids that were interested in playing. And the kids that were interested didn't want to do the books, and they didn't want to be on time for off-season weightlifting. They didn't want to go run these mounds at the beach. But the invested ones are the ones who are waiting at my doorstep. And I'm like, man, I got to come up with something for this. And I can't remember I was watching a show, and I sat up and I looked at my wife and said, Sarah, what do you think about invested over interested? She's like, yeah, it kind of sounds kind of tough. So we kept going with it. And at the end of every season, I'll always ask the guys, what did it mean to you, especially the seniors?
Sure. And
the seniors like, Coach, it's something we kind of live by now, because, you put it on everything, but you always talk about it, especially during the tryouts. And at the end of the season, are you going to be invested in the off season? Are you going to wake up at 6 a.m. so that you can get your running in before the rest of your day starts. It was the Mark Cuban talking about how he gets up at 5 to work out so that he can do the rest of his business stuff. And with invested over interested, I can take it to any aspect of life. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're late to class. You're not invested in your books. You're not invested in your books. You're not invested in being eligible. You're not invested in being eligible. You're not invested into you. So it kind of, you can break it down to the simplest thing, but it could be the most broad thing.
And for you as a coach, obviously this is going to be something that you take in and you live and you embrace as well. So if you had to define, for lack of a better term, what an invested coach would be in their program versus an interested coach, what do you think the difference is in that?
We talked about this morning in my staff meeting.
Love it.
I've got 3 new coaches on my staff.
Okay.
And 2 of them are brand new to high school coaching, and 1 was a rival at a school that used to beat the brakes off me. And I talked to them, and I've got the tab up in the upper left-hand corner of coaches. What did you do today to give back to the program or be a better coach? And it's a spreadsheet that we started a month and a half ago. And I have mine up top so that they see it all, because I need to do something every day. I have 24 hours in a day, and I've got to use at least one of those hours to make sure that my program or a program that I'm working with, like Push, got better that day. Because if I take a day off, how can I hold a kid accountable for taking a day off? Mm-hmm. And it's as simple as putting up 2 or 3 dribbling drills for guys. Or like today is Friday, it's grade check day. And myself and one of my assistants, she is a security guard here, we've already walked the building doing grade checks to show. And my thing is, if you want to make this team match or beat my investment, and we have 6 seniors that are currently on this squad that I couldn't have asked for more because they did meet or exceed my investment. They'd get out of practice and then they'd be at my house working out. During this time of COVID and shutdowns, I built a full weight room in my garage, and these guys are in there lifting. And if that doesn't stream investment, not only to basketball and athletics, but to your personal fitness, as a PE teacher, it made my heart just blow up. So it goes along with, if I had to define it, do something each day to make yourself and what you care about better.
And is this something that you've kind of always had within you as a coach, like this level of investment? Is there something that kind of has brought it out along your coaching journey? I'm just curious about when you really felt like you really honed in and really took that to heart personally as a coach, or have you kind of always had that mentality as a coach?
Growing up in the 90s, you saw the coaching carousel always happen, the 80s and the 90s. I've always had this overlying fear that, oh my gosh, if we lose this game and we look bad, I'm going to get fired. Or, oh man, if an AD or somebody else looks at this practice and it's not going well, I'm going to get fired. So I know that's crazy, but yeah. I think that's what's driven me to get to where I am now, because I always want to have that looking over my shoulder fear. I mean, everybody's replaceable, and it's a terrible thing to think about, but every 4 years, I'm going to replace all these players within 4 years.
Yeah. And
I want to be the coach that's irreplaceable, and that they have to drag me off the court when I'm like 85. And they're like, Coach, you're good. We've got your name on the court. You've done what you've needed to do. So that I never want to, and I never want to be outworked. We've got a coach out here, Courtney Kofer, Coach Kofer, I'm sorry if you're watching this, happy birthday. But he always puts on Twitter every morning, it's the first thing I see, man, I'm not going to get outworked today. I'm like, oh, challenge accepted. I'm going to outwork you by noon. And it's just silly stuff that keeps me motivated to keep going, because the day I relax and I'm like, oh, we could take it easy. I feel like I didn't give it my best. And we look at things, Q, who I talked about, tears his Achilles playing defense. The whole game could have been taken away from him that night. He's going to bounce back stronger. You see Kobe, one day he's with us, one day he's not. So I want to make sure that when I lay my head on the pillow, that time between I go to sleep and I lay down, I can look back on that day and say, I did everything I possibly could to make sure everything was better than when I got there.
And I think for me, that can be hard because I always think, I don't know how you feel, but I always think I could do more. Even if I've done a lot, sometimes I'm like, man, I still, maybe I could have done more. Maybe I could have done this, that, the other.
I've got two motivating parents in Mary and Dave Johnson that they let me know all the time.
Yeah. So do you ever get to that point where you are, I don't want to say like satisfied, but where you tell yourself that you have like done enough, where if you were to try and invest more or do more, that it might have a negative effect in terms of disrupting like a work-life balance or things like that? How do you kind of manage the line where you don't kind of go over to the point where it starts pulling at other aspects of your life?
That's a good one. I dare say that I tiptoe that line every day. Thank God for my wife. She is the greatest athletic wife ever. I joke around with people all the time. They're like, does your wife even know who you are? You're never home, or you're always out in the weight room, or you're always on the court. And I'll joke and be like, she knew what she was getting into when she said I do. But she also embraces it too. And she loves the athletes being around. So that makes it easy. Mm-hmm. But there's usually a point in practice where one of my assistants will look at me like, Coach, we're good. If we keep going, we're going to ruin something. And I don't use the word satisfied a lot. I'll just be like, okay, we're good for today. And then I'll think of 13 things on the 5-minute ride home. Done that. But to answer the question, I don't know. At the end of the season, I make it mandatory for myself, my staff, and my players to take 5 days. We don't talk to each other. Get back to your regular lives before I kind of abducted you for 6 months. And that kind of helps make the balance. And I always make time. I have 3 kids and they're awesome. Always make time for them, but it's a juggling act, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think just as you mentioned, as important it is to have everything basketball related and coaching related, like structured and organized, you also have to purposefully structure to not do basketball, at least for a little bit, or to at least give yourself that break to sort of let the players get a break from you as a coach sometimes. And then they need some time away to recharge. Yeah, no, I totally get that. Now, with your level of investment, personally, one of the things that I know a lot of coaches who are really invested and they're really passionate, they really try to kind of light that fire in their players and get them to love the game and learn the game and be just as hungry about the game as the coaches are themselves. So I kind of want to ask about that process of really kind of lighting that fire under players and what that looks like. And then what strides have you seen players make once you can see that they kind of have that fire in them and they're really invested?
I'll never forget the day that VCU was in the tournament and they showed a video before the game of Shaka going through his drills with his players. And he was taking charges. And I'm like, yo, I play for that guy. I think that it's a multi-step process to get kids to buy in, especially this generation. When I was growing up, you either did what the coach said or you weren't around. And this generation, and I love it, and I tell them all the time, they are one of the most important ones because they ask why. Now, there's a time to ask why, and there's a time to just do it. But this generation, if you can relate to them and they see that you're genuine in what you say and what you do, I think that a lot of them will jump through a wall for you. And if you can get one to do it, then everybody's going to follow. It always just takes one. And we did push tryouts the other day. And in this gym, we've got kids from DC all the way to North Carolina and some very, very high-level basketball players. I'm the only short, white, fat guy in the gym. And I joke around about that all the time. And the kids are looking at me like a lot of them know who I am, but they don't because they know me through social media. That's another way to do it too. Coaches, it's not a bad thing. But they're like, yo, that's Coach 3 Johnson. And I'm like, oh gosh, they're saying that. Guys, my name is Coach Johnson. You could just call me that. But I'll do what I ask them to do. And I'll always post videos of it online too. As dumb as I might look, I'll do it because I never want to ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do.
Yeah.
I was in middle school and we had this teacher that she was a health teacher, she told us not to smoke. I was like, oh, that makes sense. And then I see her in a park and she's smoking and I'm like, how does this, what? And I told myself very early on, if you're going to tell somebody to do something, you better be willing to do it first so that they know you're genuine. And there's like a poster I saw, and I want to say it's like people digging a hole into a mountain. And it says, don't lead from behind. It's got this guy cracking a whip, lead from in front, and he's got the shovel. And I think that's like the coolest thing. Mm-hmm. And again, the most important part is being invested in the kids too. Don't think of them as players. Don't think of them as 4-year cycles. These are adults that you get to make an impact on their life. And if you show that, they'll do anything for you.
And you've had to have had those moments. I was going to let you speak on it where like you've seen like the light bulb, like click in those players. Have you seen where they've crossed over to the other side? What does that look like? And when do you know as a coach, like, all right, this kid, when you look on the court, you're like, all right, this kid's doing it. This kid's in now. I know I got him.
We had one this year and I love this kid to death. His name's Christian Castro and did not play as much as he should have last season. Didn't play a lot, didn't play much at all. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him in the offseason. I said, I'm going to do everything I can possibly for you. I'll meet with you every day. We'll go through drills. We'll do this. We'll do that. And his biggest strength is pushing the ball up the floor as fast as he can. So we went back to a transition style offense and we go into this winter league and he's got 20 points and 10 assists. And he looks at me. And there's two ways of looking at the look he gave me. The one look that I'm really hoping is like, yeah, coach, you finally gave me the ball and I showed you I could run with it. The other look is, yo, I could have done this. You should have done this last year. And he'll bust my stones all about it. But it hit that he believed in the investment because he easily could have transferred. Mm-hmm. And he could have gone to another school and played. But he stuck through it. He worked out all summer, all COVID break, motivated other players, and he saw that it paid off. And now we've got four or five of our seniors going on to play college ball because of their investment in the program and their investment in themselves. So it was a big smile, aha moment where they saw, hey, if I do what coach is telling me to do, chances are it's going to work out.
And that's really great too, because in that particular instance, then it was like you saw it and you saw like almost like the light bulb come on and everything like that. And I think another thing too that's kind of cool about the story you mentioned is that with your players, like you can have those conversations, kind of like joke with each other a little bit and kind of, get after it. Yeah. And that's a family mentality. And I think that speaks to, if you have that family mentality, and you can certainly probably speak to this, that allows for you as a coach to also maybe have some of those tough conversations with your players. And since they know that you care about them, they know the investment's there. So maybe you can actually say some things that you wouldn't normally be able to, right?
We had a lot of discussions when a lot of the Black Lives Matter movement came through. And remember when that all happened and what went down in Baltimore and George Floyd and everything, we were in isolation. It was the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
And we had some very tough but great conversations in my garage with these guys, because a lot of them, they'll come to me with things because we have a level of professional comfort, if that makes sense, a coach to a player relationship where maybe they're a bit, teenagers are teenagers. They don't want to talk to their parents anyways. I got a teenager. She doesn't want to talk to me, but they talk to me about it, and I might be the first person they talk to. And again, I might not look like them, but we had those tough conversations, and it was some of the most rewarding stuff I've ever had as a coach. Because it's like these kids, not only have they bought in on the floor, but off the floor, they see me as somebody that they can talk to.
And that requires a lot of not only trust, but it takes time, because trust isn't something that's built within like one conversation when they come in the door as a freshman and then they automatically trust who you are. And it is a really big process. And I think that one of the things that you've kind of touched on a couple of times is the family component. And it sounds like there's a lot of culture building or team building or family building, depending on the context your program uses. So are there like deliberate things that you've done to kind of do that, like team building or culture building, whether it's on the court or off the court?
We pride ourselves in being a family as much as we can. And I preach it to guys. I steal it from Mark Storm all the time. If you give me 4 years, I'll give you a lifetime. My phone will always be on. My house will always be open. And I've got guys that never played for me, but they did an off-season training with me that are now like our kids. They come into the house. They've all got keys that they never use. They just walk in and they'll look at my wife, "Hey, Mom," and they'll check in on her, and they help raise my kids. Like one of them right now is babysitting my kids while they're at home. And we preach family as much as we can, and that'll hit to most of the team. Some maybe it won't, but we try to keep together off the floor as well. We do try workouts, which will go to Mount Trashmore. We have this giant landfill that they turn into a state park. We go train there, and then we go to the beach and train. And we try to do all this different stuff. A couple of years ago, we went bowling, where these guys get to see that I'm not just a basketball coach who's here to only care about basketball.
Yeah.
And you guys are more than just players. I think LeBron hit it perfectly when he said, "I'm more than an athlete." And it's something that there's coaches that get it and there's coaches that don't. And there's adults that get it and adults that don't. In my case, these are young men that are going to shape the future of the world. And if I can get what I believe is the right way and let them mold off of it like I've molded off of other people, I think we're going to be in a good spot. And I think when they see that you care about them like that, they're willing to do anything for you like you're going to do anything for them.
And when you create an environment like that, where the investment is so great, it's like you've already won in a sense. Like there's so many victories you've already achieved that on the court, like obviously you're looking for success and looking to do well, but you've already built up all of these other winning situations and winning outcomes already that I feel like as a coach, you already kind of feel successful before even that first game starts, because like here's all this great stuff that culture wise and just human relation wise that we've created that's so many really awesome things to look back on for sure. And when you've kind of laid that groundwork and you're invested, the players are invested, and things are kind of humming along and the season's ready to start, what does this sort of look like on the court in terms of the way that the team is playing and the way that the team is acting with one another and working together as a team? What is like a bought in, invested team? What does it look like come game day when they're taking the floor?
During the JV game, I love our guys to sit together. I don't make it mandatory.
Yeah.
But I want them there together, because not only will the younger JV guys look up in the crowd and see the togetherness, but on the floor, I want one day, and I beg for it, and it's gonna be so fake when it happens, but I can't wait. somebody misses a free throw or something and they hang their head, and we've all seen the video, his teammate runs up and picks his chin right up.
Oh, yeah.
They do a lot of, they'll go up and say something next to each other, but it's when you care about the guy next to you as much as you care about yourself, it's evident.
Yeah.
And you can see it. And there's no real set example. It's no extra pass or high five or whatever. But it's that. It's sprinting over to your teammate to pick them up. Not because your coach made it mandatory for that to happen. It's because that's your brother on the ground who just finished an A&1, and he shouldn't have to pick himself up. You're right there for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are just moments that you see that, won't necessarily show up on a stat line or anything like that. But as a coach, you're like, all right, this team is together. And I think that those are the things that not only do you notice, and obviously your players know that that's happening, but like everybody in the gym kind of notices that sort of thing going on. And you all of a sudden, even fans from the other team are like, whoa, like what that team's doing, like, that's awesome. Like that's what
that last bench player, the kid who works his butt off in practice, but doesn't play, when he finally gets in the game and the starters are sitting on the bench and they erupt when he scores or gets a steal.
Mm-hmm.
We had that moment last year where we had a kid who wasn't with us a lot during the season. He gets in the game, he gets a steal, he gets out on the break. And the next thing I know, I'm being run over by my players because they're so excited for this kid. And I was like, it doesn't matter the outcome of this game. Yes, I want to win.
Sure.
But these guys have come together now.
Yeah. Have you ever been in situations, I know I have a couple of times, you ever been in situations when you have this level of investment as a coach and you're putting all this in, or even you've had players who are putting all this work in, but it's just not translating on the court in one way or another, where you kind of like feel like you're kind of hitting this wall where you're just not really getting the results that you necessarily think on the scoreboard that either you as a coach or the players on the court would have? Have you ever had situations like that you've kind of had to like push through and try and get over the hump on?
It's a tough one. It really is.
Yeah.
I was coaching at a school a couple of years ago, and we weren't very good, but we worked hard. And as a coach, a real coaches will understand that sentence, that you weren't very good, but your team did everything you asked them to do. And when you're putting in all the work and you're invested, and the kids are too, but the result isn't there, it breaks your heart, but they take pride in the little successes. And we had one kid come up to me and be like, man, why does it even matter what we do? We're going to lose. And I was like, oh.
Uh-oh.
And I just remember standing there like, there's two avenues I can go down. I can get mad and light this kid up, or I can take this back to the drawing board and figure out how to remotivate this team. Because if this is how the team feels,
sure,
then I've got to reevaluate it, because it's not about me. Basketball back in the day used to be about the coach. Like Phil Jackson was going to run the triangle. It didn't matter who he had. He was going to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And the Pistons were going to beat you into submission. The Lakers were just going to run. Nowadays, coaches have to adapt to the players. And you've got to make it almost like, if you, like me, I love the dribble drive, and I believe it's the wave of the future of basketball, but the team I'm on right now is more of a transition-based Euro motion type team.
Okay.
And that's where we went. And that's where Castro saw all the success. Yeah. He's like, okay, I don't need to dribble this certain way to get this reaction. I'm going to attack the basket. And if I get stopped, then I do this. And I know I'm getting it back, and this is where we're going to go. And we love the UNC secondary because it's one pass and we can fly up the floor like we need to.
Yeah.
And then we're looking at this incoming class, this incoming group of varsity kids. And we're like, okay, we now have the Euro motion. We've got the dribble drive. We might need to run flex this year because these kids can shoot, but they're not tremendously fast. Mm-hmm. So it breaks your heart to hear that the investment isn't full on the other end of things, but you're going to hit a brick wall. And as a teacher, you're not allowed to give up with that brick wall. You have to find a way to do it. My old principal, Katrina Roundtree, she preached differentiation. She's like, that kid's going to learn that way, but that kid's going to learn that way.
Sure.
And I think that really helped me in the coaching aspect in terms of if I can differentiate this and this to that kid, he's going to buy in. One way or another, we're going to find what really gets him going. And
that's so tricky to do because people are all different, and teenagers are their own type of people as well. And you've probably had situations that you've come across where the way that maybe that 14, 15-year-old freshman and the conversation, what they needed to buy in might be different than when that player becomes like a junior or a senior. Mm-hmm. And it might be a completely different conversation because they went through their own process and like, oh, this player who I had figured out 2 years ago, like they're on a different path now, or they're going through different things. And it's almost like you have to kind of like re-up on that investment sometimes. Yeah. Like the freshman investment from that player might be a little different from a sophomore, junior, or senior, if you kind of come across that too.
And that goes along with, what did you do to make the program better today? I preach to my coaches, have daily conversations with these kids. And when you do that, that's another part of the investment. You're going to find out what they go through day to day. Go drive them home one day, see where they live. And, I've got a best friend who she pushes me to be a teacher first, basketball coach second. She fails miserably at it, but she always preached, you've got to understand home before you understand them. Mm. And when you can understand home, you can really tap into where their investment will click.
Mm. Yeah. And it's so easy to see them as basketball players, right? They come in and you see them as basketball players. And I know that it's easy to just envision them on the court, and that's like the only context you get of them, because I've had that too. But then when you are able to kind of expand that a little bit and you kind of like see their neighborhoods or you see their homes and actually just kind of see their day-to-day goings about, you're like, oh, like this is much more of like a human thing now that we have with this player, and they're not just a basketball player in my gym. Like, oh, I see all these other things that they have going on. Really can open your eyes for sure. Mm-hmm. Some of the experiences that the players have and all the other things that they have going on that aren't basketball. I know I've gotten like locked in onto the basketball part, and then it's like, oh, whoa, you have all these other things going on too, and all this other stuff that you got to be aware of.
It's crazy how much these kids have going on now. I mean, I look at, these kids are trying to get all these millions of followers and all this stuff. And when I was their age, I was like, yo, am I going to go home and play Double Dragon or Double Dragon?
Yeah, no, that's funny. Yeah, just the amount of things and even just options in some cases that players have today. 100%. Now, you touched on this at the beginning about your staff and what investment looks like for members of your staff. So for those younger coaches who might be listening, or new coaches who are maybe looking to take over a program, what advice would you give them in order to like get their staff like on board with the level of investment that would reach the same level that the head coach is looking to get at? I know you touched on it a little bit earlier.
I wish somebody had asked me that, or somebody had asked some of my head coaches about that, because coming up, I'd have coaches that I'd be working JV or assistants that wanted to do everything themselves because they wanted it done a certain way. My piece of advice would be, they're on your staff for a reason. If you can't trust them, they shouldn't be around. And trust them with responsibilities. With our grades, I have divvied up all the JV and varsity guys. And every Friday they need to check in. And they also have to have weekly conversations with players. I don't want my assistants to just see these kids as basketball players. One assistant works in the building with me. The other two work outside the building. And the only time you're going to see these kids are when they're on the court.
Yeah.
And we preach all the time of the family and that stuff. we do a weekly dinner at my house. And I tell my staff, I'm like, I want you there because you need to see these kids for more than just players. But to answer the question correctly this time, give them responsibilities and trust them with them. I have my head assistant, Brian Peters. His first year had to be miserable under me because I thought I knew everything. And I was like, we're going to do this, this, and this. And bless his heart, man, he was with it and he went through it. And we battled back and forth because I always thought, well, he's teaching this a different way. And if he talks too much, they're going to think he's coaching and I'm not the head coach. It isn't about us as head coaches. It is about the kids. And it's tough to realize that because when you get that job, you're like, yo, I'm the head coach and I'm the face. And nowadays, it's very rare that anybody sees me and I don't, like in this interview, I've probably mentioned 30 other people. Mm-hmm. It's weird for me to talk about myself because I want everybody else to get better and to get all the recognition. You know, I'll do a post-game interview and they'll be like, oh, coach, what about this? What about this adjustment? Like, man, Jaden Eason told me that pick and roll would work in the first quarter. So I remembered that. That call's on him. Or, hey, coach, what was your halftime adjustments for this? I was like, did you see that stop that Aaron Taylor made in the third quarter? That changed the whole game. Mm-hmm. Relax about yourself and really make it about the program. And everybody has a role. You hired these assistants or they were given to you. Find their strong suits and let them go. Because if they're a good assistant coach, and Brian told me this the first year, I'm here to make you look good, coach. And I'm like, oh, really? Oh, okay. And they're all working for you and it's for the program. So trust your assistants with responsibilities because you will drive yourself crazy. You know, I know my first 4 years after our season had ended, I'd sleep for like 3 days because I had all that burden on my own shoulders. Your assistants can handle it. They're going to be coaches. Your job should be to make them coaches.
Yeah. And with that, if you want them to be, you know, really good coaches and get that head coaching position, you have to give them that level of trust. Yep. You have to let them do it, right? You have to sort of say, all right, you know, like do it in this sort of environment where like, it's okay. Like it's okay to fail. It's okay to, you know, try this out and see what happens. But for you, and I think for a lot of head coaches, at least in the very beginning, like you take it all on yourself or you take it all on you. Right. Yeah. And you want to
miss stuff.
Yeah. Of course.
You know, as I've gotten older, I've given my assistants jobs to do during practice. Like, yo, you're going to run this drill and you're going to run this drill. That allows me to step back and really see everything. Or I can stand next to a kid who's not in the drill and be like, yo, what are you going to do in this drill? You know, what is that kid doing wrong? Or, hey, can you say this to them? Because I don't want my own voice to be the only voice that's heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does a lot to empower the assistants or like your freshman coach, your JV coach, when they get to, you know, run things with your varsity guys or girls, and they get to, you know, be seen as that equal. And I've mentioned this on other episodes before that it's really important. And this is just my personal opinion. I think it's really, really important for your assistants or your JV or your freshman coach to have that level of investment from in a relationship standpoint with like your varsity players, because you're going to need those coaches in those like big varsity games, and you need your players to trust those coaches that they know what they're talking about, and they, you know, they've been running things and they have that relationship. And, you know, you've probably had situations where you've been focusing on something else and you've needed one of your assistants to maybe talk to somebody, one of your guys on the bench or whatever, and just have a really productive conversation, and everyone's just kind of working together.
It's very rare when I make a sub that I talk to them, because we say that there's one head on the snake. You know, what coach says goes, but we all might say it a different way. Mm-hmm. You know, we have terminologies and stuff like that, but how Lafayette Smith says something to Castro might be different than how I say it. And Lafayette might say it in a way that resonates with Castro better. And
Sure.
when I'm talking to a player, I'm looking at him and stuff. I'm missing stuff in the game. So yeah, it leads to the investment with the assistants because they don't want to let you down, and they don't want to let the team and the program down if they're a really good assistant. And again, it goes into invested over interested. I can be an interested assistant coach and just go through the motions and wear all the gear. But if I'm invested, I want to make everything better. And if coach is going to trust me with it, I'm going to do everything I can to be perfect with it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point as well. And it just sounds like when everybody's invested, it sounds like everyone's just working for the same goal and everyone's working for the same purpose, and you don't have different agendas or different things going on all at once. Like everybody's kind of locked in and locked focused on what needs to happen. Wanted to mention, because by the time this episode gets released, we'll be kind of transitioning into that off season period and kind of transitioning into the following year. So when you have a season kind of wrap up and you've had that level of investment, you've done everything you can, your players have done everything they can, and then the year's done and now it's time to roll over and transition into that next year. How do you sort of like recharge or reassess what needs to be done, or maybe almost evaluate yourself and see like what steps need to be taken within like the investment process? Is there like some sort of reflection period or thing that you go through?
Oh yeah, and it's something that I've stolen from coaches over the years. Here at Grassfield, our AD will meet with us and he'll go over stuff that he sees. He's our time person too, because he's a sports junkie. And this dude, Matt Puryear's investment to Grassfield is unmatched. This is a 6A school, which is the top in Virginia. We have every sport imaginable. And this guy is running around crazy, but he still finds time to know every coach's name, every athlete's name. And he'll meet with all of us and he'll be like, yo, I did this game and this is what I saw. And this is what I really like. These are some things that we can work on. And I love it. And with the investment going to the players, I'm always preaching that you made a difference. Like our seniors last year, they showed everybody that defense is paramount, because they went from kids who weren't really playing in the beginning of the year because I really like these other players.
Yeah.
But then their defense got them on the floor, and they showed, if you play defense, coach is going to trust you. So at the end of every year, I'll give the seniors a Google form, because they don't like doing it face-to-face. And it says, what did you really like this season? What do you think you'll be remembered for, your group of seniors? And what can Coach Johnson and the staff do better next year? And you'd be surprised when you don't have to put your name on it, what'll get said in that. Because a kid will remember something from November 11th at a 6:30 practice. He'll remember it in February.
Yeah.
Like, you cussed me out in the hallway because I had my shoe untied. Don't do that. And I'll be like, oh, okay. But I love to put the onus of the program on other people, because I'll always have my reflection period, and I'll sit down and I'll write out what do we have to improve on for the players and as a staff. But I really take into account what the assistants and the seniors have to say.
Sure.
And then I'll ask the juniors, hey, what do you want for this upcoming season? What are our goals? Because I let them make our goals, because it's not me playing. I don't score points. I don't have turnovers. And nobody's going to remember the head coach from the 1992 team, but they're sure going to remember that best player.
Yep.
So when people look at that banner, like I grew up where John Wallace, who played for the Knicks, played. And I'll look at it, the banner that he put up there, but that was John's team.
Sure.
And we're riddled with athletes, Iverson and the Halls, all of them, the Vick brothers, all of them came from this area. We go to Boo Williams all the time, and it's got the giant mural. And I had one of my kids, he's like, I want to be on Boo's wall one day. I want my head next to Iverson and Sugar Rogers. I'm like, you better get a left hand, son. But if you put the onus on them, it's going to, and you're humble enough to understand that other people have input. It's not just your program. I think that reflection is the best one.
and it takes a level of kind of swallowing your pride a little bit sometimes to do that and really take it. And I know I've done that even as a teacher. I've had those reflection things, and I just like immediately want to instinctively like defend myself and like,
yeah,
like no,
like,
like,
no, I did it for this and this.
yeah, right. But you almost have to like just take it on the chin a little bit and really just sort of be like, oh, okay, well, see what adjustments and see what changes, see what I can make. But then it ultimately kind of ties back to like your belief in like what's doing right for like the kids. And for that to happen, you almost have to set your ego aside a little bit and sort of just take it and make those adjustments as needed. And it also sounds like what it does, and I'll let you speak on it, also maybe kind of refines the process of investment. Maybe like each year, like you sort of can kind of zero in and just get a little bit better because you're taking that feedback and you're kind of slowly year by year kind of getting to that, I want to say perfect, but nothing's perfect, but you know what I mean, that like optimal level of investment as a coach. Like, okay, I'm finally getting to like whatever that sweet spot is where like I'm doing the best job that I can.
Yeah, those forms at the end of it, I'll meet with the players. The juniors we have put their name on it because I have on it, what are your goals for next year? Do you want to be all conference, all district, all state? And then we sit down and we break it down. Okay, well, this is what we're going to have to do. And this is what you're going to have to do. And this is what I am going to do for you and with you. And when you can do that and the kids really think that they have a say, like we were talking before we went live of how our seniors were actually able to create this year's jerseys, our away jerseys. We threw out the blues and we got reds, and I'm obsessed with them. And they were like, yo, we can't wait to get into these jerseys. Now, got to find a way to get them in them. But when the kids feel, and at least this is my thought, when everybody feels that they have a stake in the investment of the overall program, when they have a say and when that say is listened to, I think that it makes the reflection and the path much clearer, because everybody's thinking, well, if I want us to do this, I have to do this. And it all comes to a common goal of we want to be successful.
Yeah. And that's really good. That's a really good point. Like there's a lot of, in this, the conversations that we're having is sort of just a lot of reflection and just a lot of just really like thinking and self-reflecting and just things that aren't even necessarily like basketball related. You kind of talk about all the things that are needed from like a basketball standpoint to invest, but a lot of this doesn't really much have to do with like X's and O's. It's more of just human connection.
X's and O's are going to take care of themselves. Hold on one second. I got to plug in this laptop.
You got it.
The X's and O's will always take care of themselves.
Sure.
As a young coach, I thought, man, I'm the next big thing at coaching.
I know it all.
Jackson.
Yeah.
And then got my teeth punched in for about 9 years.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, there's a little bit of reflection, and I'll do it daily. But you had mentioned it earlier, Coach. It looks like you're never sitting down. You're always doing something.
Yeah.
I want to constantly evolve instead of dwell on the past. And it's something I'm really pushing the players now of next play. And it's that cornerback mentality in football of you can't dwell if you messed up, and you can't dwell if you made the greatest play on earth, because there's another one coming. So I'm always trying to evolve myself and be around people that do things a little bit different.
Yeah.
To me, coaching is just a melting pot, and you just got to keep taking it and making it your own in the best you can.
Yeah, I try to tell my girls, like, don't let one mistake turn into two. And one of the easiest ways that happens is when you are lost mentally after like a bad play, and then all of a sudden that turnover leads into, I don't know, a foul or something like that, just because you didn't recover to get into that next play mentality. But you're 100% right that also translates into doing something really well. I think we've all kind of seen those moments where players like celebrating something they do on the court, the next
not getting back on defense,
and then they don't get back on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Before we hit our concluding segment, there's something you brought up that I did want to touch on, because it sounds like you've had a lot of success, especially where you're currently at right now. And we kind of talked about the investment from players and the investment from your staff, but it sounds like you're in a really good situation where you have investment from just the school itself, where it sounds like from the staff and athletic directors and the people at the school itself. So can you just speak on what that has meant to your program, to have like all that levels of support and have people who are, really invested in your program's success?
I have always been blessed with athletic directors that were very supportive of my approach to coaching. And I don't want that to sound like I have some weird approach it's regular, but I've always wanted to be the most positive guy in the room or the most motivating guy in the room, because people will flock to that and people want to be around that, as opposed to the person or the coach who sits around and complains and whines about what they don't have or what they should have had or what somebody else got, but I did something and I didn't get. I don't want to be that person. And here at Grassfield, this is year 2 for me. I made it a point to go meet all the coaches and to, I walked around. I finally got into the building this year. I've never actually worked in the building I coached in, and this building's huge, so I've lost like 30 pounds walking. But going to meet all the teachers, especially the ones that my players are in, like, hey, I'm Erik Johnson. I'm the boys basketball coach. You've got so-and-so in your class. And I think that when teachers see that, they're like, oh my gosh, we have a basketball coach that is invested in the kids academically. I had a parent call me the other day and I'm like, I'm more interested in your kid graduating than I am them bouncing a basketball.
Sure.
Yeah, I want them to play for me. But if your kid's not going to graduate, that doesn't do anything for me as a teacher or a coach. I failed your son. So, trying to make sure that the academic part, and when you get teachers bought in, then teachers will say things to admin. When admin hears that, man, these teachers kind of like Coach Johnson, he's a little bit everywhere. He's pushing kids in the classroom. He's making sure they have their grades right.
Sure.
Because we can make a teacher's life easier. They'll make the student's life easier. And everything just comes together.
And that sounds like a really good nugget for young coaches or like new coaches coming into a program, is to really ingratiate yourself as you can with like the athletic directors or the teachers, because and it's unfortunate, but this as well as I do, that there can be a real divide between teachers and the coaches, especially if the coaches don't work at the school. Like there's kind of like this adversarial relationship where sometimes teachers think that like coaches will not necessarily hold players to like high standards or anything like that. And so I think as a coach, if you establish that right away, like, hey, I want to cut through this, perhaps notion you might have about what I think of student athletes, and really emphasize how important the student part is. To me, it's amazing how much you can just sort of clear the air and be like, okay, like that's a coach who like I support and I'm ready to work with them 100% of the way. And it sounds like you definitely have had that situation as well.
We've got amazing teachers here at Grassfield. And when I could see a different look in their eyes when I went and introduced myself, just because, we've all heard stories of coaches going to teachers and being like, hey, let's not have player A take this test today because it might mess up eligibility.
Oh no. Yeah.
Or, athletes getting to skip classes and stuff like that. I walked into Push, and our 15U coach is Clint Wright. I worked with him at Lakeland. And his first statement was, you're a student athlete and student comes first. You're going to graduate. And that has always resonated with me, because I use my own kids as an example of your education is going to come first. You might be the best basketball player ever. If you don't graduate, you're going to be the best basketball player in the Sunday Adult League. And, that didn't get you anywhere. And it's a terrible thing to say, but we all know somebody that hangs out at Applebee's on Friday night telling us their high school stories. I don't want my players to be that person.
Yeah. And I think it's just so much more satisfying to know the the student part, because that part will take them very far and open up so many opportunities for them. But as the old saying goes, the ball stops bouncing at some point. So to get.
And then when these kids see their teachers in the stands because they're good students,
Oh,
they see teachers there, it helps with the cheering section, and the student section's got teachers in it now. It's a whole environment here. And when I took this job, our principal spoke about the Grizzly way.
Sure.
And it took me a couple of days to understand that. And I'm like, what does this mean? And then our first game, I'm seeing teachers in the stands.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Everybody buys into everything, and it's awesome.
Exactly. No, yeah. When the teachers come out, especially, I've had those situations where I've had teachers who come out who like would never normally go to games, or who tell me they don't like ever go to games, but it's like, man, ever since they've been doing, this sport, their grades have come up, and then they ask me like, hey, like, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, are you going to come watch my game? And they're like, oh, well, of course. Like now, like, it's just amazing, those little conversations that can develop where, if you show that investment in their grades, and then the kid starts getting their grades up, and the teacher's excited, and then it's like it all builds on itself. And then you've really created something special there, right?
Yep.
Sure. Awesome. So to wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So I'm going to go ahead and start here with this first one. I'm sure you have a lot that you can choose from, but what is a coaching moment from your coaching career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
When at the end of my first season, my first varsity season, my head assistant, Brian Peters, he's still with me after all these years, and I don't know why, but he wrote me a letter. And it was a very trying season, both on and off the court. I thought I knew everything, blah, blah, blah. He wrote me a letter, and the last sentence in it was, would you want your own kid to play for you?
Ooh.
And I still have that letter, and I still think about it in that little brief reflection that I do at the end of every season. If my kid was on this team, would I want them to play for me?
Mm.
And in the last couple of years, I've been able to absolutely look at myself and be like, yes, I would. And that moment right there, and I know it's not like a juicy, hey, we hit a buzzer beater. I got a bunch of those. But that letter has always stuck with me in just that sentence of, would you want your kid to play for you? And young coaches, would you, if you don't have kids, would you want your parents at practice, your personal parents at practice, and would they be proud of what they saw from you?
Oh, no, I have to think about that myself. Like, I ask my mom and dad if they ever want to come stop by one of my practices at some point.
Don't sugarcoat. Don't give them some sugar-coated one, Coach. Give them a real practice.
Well, I'll have to brace them for impact before they go to one of those, I think. But no, that's really that's great, and I love that too. That applies to teaching too. Would you want like them in your classroom, or so on and so forth, right? It's a little eye-opening sometimes. Like, oh, I never thought of it that way, but it could lead to some real good reflection. That is for sure. Mm-hmm. That's really good. And to wrap up, Coach, every guest I give them, I call my 60-second soapbox. Feel free to go longer, though. It's your opportunity to get out your final thought, closing idea, your closing message, just something to leave the listeners with. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor, and you can take it away.
Oh, this is awesome. This is like Hot Ones. I'm a fan.
Yeah.
First, thank you for having me on, Coach. This has been a blast. I love doing things like this and getting little stories out. But parents out there that are listening, preach to your kids. If they want to succeed in something, they have to be invested in it. Mm-hmm. There's rec sports if you're interested. If you're invested, it's going to take time. It's going to take blood, sweat, tears, a lot of frustration. But that's part of the investment, and it's going to pay off. Young coaches, trust people, trust your assistants, and seek out things. You don't know it all. And that's coming from a guy who swore he knew it all. And players out there and anybody else, social media, I'll say this, social media can be your rise or your downfall. Make sure it's something that your grandmother could look at and could read out loud, or you could read in front of her or him, and they would be proud of you. I've watched scholarships getting taken away. I've watched scholarships happen because somebody else lost theirs. Just do everything you can to help other people and to help yourself. And social media, I use it. It's Coach 3 Johnson on all the platforms. Shoot me a follow. We'll talk basketball or whatever, but use it in its intended purpose to promote yourself, whether you're a rapper or you've got an up-and-coming podcast that I am now a huge fan of. Use social media to promote yourself and your brand positive, because at the end of the day, you are your own brand. LeVar said it best.
Yeah, 100% like that you brought up that social media thing. I think that we say it a lot, and we can't say it enough, though, especially to some of our players. And you're 100% right, too, about the opportunities that not only can be taken away, but also the opportunities that can happen because of good social media and the things that you put out there. So really good point on that. Coach Johnson, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about your program, talking about investment and all the ways that looks like from coaches to players to the whole school. It sounds like you got some really awesome things going on over there. So hopefully you have some basketball that you get to coach soon, but I know regardless, you're going to stay busy. That's for sure. So thank you, Coach, and good luck going forward. It's been great.
Thanks so much.
And thank you to all of you listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.